bye, because then I'll post the recording on the club website. So if you've got questions at any time, do you put them in the chat or unmute yourself and shout out. I always, and every time I give this, I get some great ideas from people and I add them to the slides and add them to the presentation, which has made it as nice as it is today. So let's start talking about hurricanes. So here's a quote from Admiral Chester Nimitz, after whom the aircraft carrier, I believe, is named. Maybe Randy or Carol could correct me if I'm wrong. And he says, "The time for taking all measures for a ship's safety is while still able to do so. Nothing is more dangerous for a seaman to be grudging and taking precautions, lest they turn out to have been unnecessary. Safety at sea for 1,000 years has depended on exactly the opposite philosophy." And it's kind of ironic that I'm giving this talk today. It's stuff that you needed to know 4 days ago and not tonight. But anyway, let's move on. I found Admiral Nimitz's quote to be quite long-winded. And so here's something that Billy taught me. June too soon, July standby, August a must, September forever, October not over, November remember, which I'm told is an old Coconut Grove or Miami saying. And here we are on the cusp of July and August, and the first close shave is coming up the coast as we speak. Here's what I'm going to cover tonight. What is a hurricane? I'm not a weather guy. If Tom Coburn is here, he might be able to chip in because he is a weather guy. I don't see him. Things that you need to do specific to the sailing club, whether your boat's on the rack, on the strip, or on the moorings, or even if you're just a member who'd like to be involved with preparing for a hurricane. And when I say preparing, this is a key thing, is if you organize in advance and you have a plan, then you don't worry. All of today, people have been texting me and emailing me worried. And if you have a plan, you don't worry, the tension goes away. You can pack a cooler bag with orange juice and champagne, and then you know that the rest of the day will be fine. I also have some motivating photographs. So interrupt, ask questions, learn more online. Boat US, the Coast Guard, almost every insurance company has a website about this stuff. But the thing I will say to you is making a plan is key to relaxing and having a successful transition through a storm. So what is a hurricane? So let's just look at the picture. I think we all know this game quite often. Here we go. They start in Senegal or Mali, this sort of area of Africa over here, come off as a low pressure wave. And as they go across the warm water of the tropics, or just sort of subtropics, slowly the warmth of the ocean causes convection, and it's moist air. And for those of you who don't know, moist air is lighter than dry air. So the moist air naturally rises, and because of Coriolis force, things start spinning. And in the northern hemisphere, things spin like your toilet, and in the southern hemisphere, the other way. And then it comes across, and it comes up to the area that we live in. And we saw this current one coming through the Leeward Islands over here, and it looks like it's going up that way, and we hope everything will be all right. So there we see a picture. Notice in the northern hemisphere, it's a low pressure system, a hurricane. So that means the winds go counterclockwise. And in the southern hemisphere, it's the other way. And obviously a high pressure is the other way. This is relevant to our understanding here of how storms impact the grove. So let's have a think where the current one is. It's here, and the winds are doing this, aren't they? That's when it comes past us. So the winds are going to hit our mooring field from the northeast corner. Of course, if a storm goes up over here, then the winds come from a different angle, and we typically get hit from the southeast rather than the northeast. There you go. I don't know what storm this is. Anybody who's been around longer than I have in Florida might be able to point that out. I think it's bigger than Andrew. It might be a fake picture, but it's a motivating picture. I like it. So, of course, you'll want to know You don't care if there's a storm. What you do care about is if the storm's going to hit your house or your boat or your sailing club, which is what we're talking about tonight. This picture is from last year. I can update it at some point, I guess. And it shows the typical tracks, shows tracks for however many years back of hurricanes which have been tracked by NOAA. And you can see that some of them turn off and go towards England, and Boris Johnson deserves it. Some of them go real flat across the top here and hit Mexico, and they don't deserve it. But the general pattern is this turning pattern like this, somewhere along the line. And some of them go up the Gulf over there towards Alabama and Mississippi. And some of them, like today's one, just come right round the corner, like Sandy did, and like what Dorian did last year, and indeed roughly what Irma did. It was a bit further in. So a little bit of meteorology, and again, apologize for my minuscule knowledge. How does that turn happen? In the North Atlantic is the Bermuda High, also known as the Bermuda Steering High. And depending on where that high is and how high it is, how high the pressure is, that's the guiding force for a storm coming across the Atlantic. So we see here on the right-hand side, hold on, somebody's trying to get at me. Nope, turn them off. All right, here we have on the left-hand side, sorry, the high is low, and storm comes around and it completely avoids us. If the high is big and to the south, it pushes the storm, and those are the ones that go off into the Gulf of Mexico. And if the storm's just right, it sounds like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, doesn't it? The storm is steered up into our area. So we're in one of those situations now, and you can look at that. If you go to Mike's weather page or something like that, you can look at the position and the intensity of the Northern Atlantic High, the Bermuda High, and it gives you some idea of what's going to happen. And of course, there's a lot of information available online, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But let's finish talking about tracks. So here's one from 2004, and here was one that looked like it was going to go off and get out into the Atlantic and die, did a U-turn, came straight across Florida. I wasn't around for that, but that's a really weird track. And here's what we love, the cone of uncertainty. At this point, I put on freaky music. And this is output by NOAA, of course. And we could look at the current cone of uncertainty. Whoops-a-daisy, where it is there. And we see this is what everyone's been looking at every 20 minutes, thinking that it will change. But of course, it only updates every 3 hours at the moment. There'll be an update at 8 o'clock, so we'll see that at the end of the seminar, which might change what I'm going to be doing tonight. And we can see here's the track of the cone of uncertainty. The solid area is the 3-day track, and the dotted area takes you out into the 5-day. And it's called the cone of uncertainty. Notice the word uncertainty. It's very important to understand why it's uncertain. What does the cone of uncertainty tell you? It doesn't tell you the extent of the form of the storm, because certainly it tells you where the center of the storm might be. So clearly, if we're here in Georgia and the center of the storm is there, which is still within the cone, the impact of the storm can be much greater, probably something like that over there. So it tells you where the center of the storm is. No, I'm lying to you. It doesn't tell you where the center of the storm is. It tells you within a 2/3 error where they expect the center of the storm to be. So it could be, it's 1/3 uncertain anyway. So this cone of uncertainty is very uncertain, and you have to understand that the impact of the storm can be well outside the cone of uncertainty. So, but it's a good tool to look at, and you can see it for those of you who haven't looked at one. I can't believe there's anybody here who hasn't been watching this sort of all day today. And we see that they output when the storm is, when it's just a storm and far out, the updates are every 6 hours. And at the moment, because we're getting into closer to it, the updates are every 3 hours. So there'll be an update at 8 o'clock. The primary updates are at 5 and 11. 5, 11, is that right? Trying to get my times right. 11 o'clock tonight will be the primary update. 8 o'clock is the intermediate one. 5 o'clock was a primary, and 11 o'clock this morning was a primary. I encourage you to go to the NOAA website, and if you're interested, and to read about this. And if you go to the National Hurricane Center, NHC, it will tell you, here's how you interpret the cone of uncertainty, and you can understand why it is really uncertain. Let me make one more comment about this. Every time there's a storm, about 20 people start texting me with their own personal weather forecasts, how they're watching the spaghetti model and their grandmother's toes are curling to the left and this. It's my opinion is that the people at NOAA have a lot of PhDs in meteorology, and they have a better idea than you and I do from looking at tracks on the web and asking your grandmother which way her toes are curling. I believe in NOAA, and I think it's the most consistently reliable and conservative forecasting option. Anyway, each to their own. So storms, they come in categories. So before you get to a hurricane, you get a gale, which is up to 47 knots of wind. A tropical storm, which it looks like that's what we're going to have here, up to 63 knots of wind. And then the category 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which you see increasing amounts of wind. The wind people talk about, oh, the wind, but it's not the wind that matters too much in the club mooring field. The wind does affect the strip of the mooring field, and it affects the racks. The wind has a lesser effect on the mooring field than the surge, which is the amount that the water rises in the mooring field. And you can see expected surge amounts for a different category. So I would imagine over the next couple of days, we're going to have a surge of something up to 3 or 4 feet. That's not too bad, we can cope with that, but it's pretty much at the limit of what the mooring balls can cope with, a surge of 3 or 4 feet. And let me explain why. So surge, what happens? Surge, some people think it's because the low pressure of the storm is sucking the water up. That is a minimal effect, it's less than 5%. The main cause of surge is the wind blowing the surface water across and into a confined area. So if we have wind coming in down the channel, down Brennan Channel, that's blowing the wind from the bay into our mooring field, and it blows into the mooring field and there's nowhere for it to go. So the water piles up in the mooring field, and that's what causes the surge in our mooring field. Why is that a bad deal? Is that the moorings can't cope with surge. Remember, if you're on the strip or the racks, you've got wind to deal with. Tie things down, take your boat home. We'll talk about that. If you're on the mooring, you have to deal with surge. And here's why. I'll draw you a pretty picture with my little pen. If here's your boat, sorry, not great art yet. And here's the water, and your mooring line goes something like, because we don't have a lot of scope because it's an overlapping mooring field, your mooring line goes something like that down to the mooring tied into the helicoils, which are deep into the mud at the bottom of the mooring field. Now you can imagine if the water goes up 3 feet, somewhere over here where I'm drawing the upper line, what that does is it lifts your boat up and your scope then reduces. And that puts pressure onto the mooring. The mooring probably won't break. So what's going to break as your boat lifts up? Well, firstly, one possibility is your bridle breaks. And what happens? Your boat floats away and it hits the next boat and your insurance pays or something. Or your cleats break and your boat floats away and hits another boat and your insurance pays and nobody loves you. Or alternatively, you've got a fantastic boat like mine, your cleats are strong, your bridle's strong, so it holds the front of your boat down, and eventually your boat's suddenly at a different angle, something like this. And you understand that the water now goes in your forehatch, and then your boat sinks, and then your insurance pays if you have it. So that's the problem with our mooring field. Because we have short scope on our moorings, they cannot cope with a large amount of surge. So the club has policies to avoid this problem. And let's start talking about those. Oh, motivating photographs. I think these are photoshopped. I wanted to change this one over on the left-hand side to say CGSC and have a picture of Lauren standing there with a screep on her face or something. This one was supposed to be Sandy, but it's photoshopped for sure. So that's the story. What is a storm? Just remember, it comes in, it depends where it is, and also which way it's going to blow the wind. And the wind is what blows surge into the mooring field, which affects the moorings. And it's the wind that affects the boats on the strip and in the racks that need to be tied down. So what do you need to do? Prepare for the storm. Well, there's two things. The first one I'm concerned about is keeping my boat safe because I love it. Second one is knowing the rules, because if you break the rules, you end up without a mooring or without a strip spot or without a rack slot. And those websites are on the rules are on the club website. So if you go to cgsc.org, as I have up over here, under waterfront, under hurricane policies and procedures, you find out all the rules are written down. And I'm going to review those for you now. Also in the club, under waterfront, the seminar and the slides, the updated version will be on sometime by next week in case you've missed some of it or you want to go back and see it again. And prepare for your situation. Okay, and it depends. Again, the rack versus the strip versus the moorings. Before we talk about the specifics, it's getting help. The club will do what it can for you, but you've got to be aware that the club staff, that's all the dockies and even the admin staff and Dragon and all that, they have to prepare the club for the storm. You might have seen this morning, Johnny, all the club coach boats have all been towed away. They've all disappeared. I think they've been gone. They were loading them this morning. All of the boats on the racks, that's all the sunfish and the lasers and the opties and all of those things, mosquito, have to be taken upstairs on the little davit crane and put into the big room. All the sails downstairs have to be moved. All the boats that the club owns, that's the ensigns and the Benettos, have to be moved. I know that the Benettos are now down on the Coral Gables Waterway. They went down earlier this afternoon. So the club staff cannot do that. Do not try to pay them. If they are caught with you paying them to help them, that jeopardizes their employment. They have work to do. They will try and be helpful, but you can't say, hey, I'm going on vacation, deal with my boat, here's $100. Won't work. A better thing to do is to have friends to help you. Get a group of friends together who you trust with similar boats and similar degrees of bravery and make a team that works together. I have a team consisting of James Gruppenhoff, Bob Aitken, and Neil Tawari and myself, and we work together as a group of 4, and we helped each other yesterday prepare our boats. Friends are useful. They can be bribed with sandwiches and rum, but ultimately, you do have to have your own plan. So let's talk about boats on the moorings, and this is kind of a touchy point because for any of you who are at the club watching this, you might notice that there's a lot of boats still out on the moorings. Mine will be gone later. So what do you get? NOAA issues 4 kinds of alerts. The first one is a tropical storm watch. Remember, a tropical storm is for winds up to 63 nautical miles an hour. And a watch means there's a possibility of that happening. So there's a possibility of winds up to 63 nautical miles an hour in the area for which the watch is issued. And that's issued 2 days before that possibility comes in actuality. What we recommend at that time is that you reduce windage. And I'll talk about that. But I mean things like taking down your jib, strapping up your main, taking off your bimini, those sorts of things. The next kind of alert that comes from NOAA is a tropical storm warning. The word warning here means there's a probability. And of course, everything's a probability by Heisenberg for you physicists out there. But they think it's really likely that something's going to happen. And this is issued a day and a half out of the expected event. The club mooring agreement and strip agreement specifies, but by this time, you must have reduced windage. And it's optional to take your boat away, to take it in a trailer if you're on the strip, to load your kids' opti in the back of the truck and take it home if you're on the racks, whatever. The club recommendation is to do this 72 hours out. And clearly we're running a little bit thin for time this year for this storm. Anyway, we seem to be okay. Then the next 2, these are for hurricanes. Remember, hurricanes is winds for 64 nautical miles or higher. 2 days out, there's a watch saying there'll be a possibility. And the club ruling by your mooring agreement or strip agreement is that you must have reduced windage, and we recommend that you be gone. So really at the moment, for all the people who've got boats, the club recommendation is you shouldn't be there. And most of us still are, I know. Anyway, moving on, hurricane warning, day and a half out. If by that time, you must be gone. So if a hurricane warning comes into the Miami-Dade area, you can't be on the mooring field. And we recommend that you move 3 days out, move early. And there's reasons for that I'll explain. Let me highlight quite clearly here what the rule says, because you can get caught by this. After Irma, 11 boats were thrown off the mooring field, despite me fighting tooth and nail for a couple of them. It's by this time. It doesn't mean when the warning comes, not if the warning comes, it's before the warning comes, if you excuse me ripping off Ron White's comedy. So really, if you think that there's going to be a warning of today's storm, you should be down there this evening with a bottle of champagne and moving your boat. Reducing windage, what's that all about? Here it is. Take all your sails down, particularly the jib. If you don't take your jib down, that's what happens. This was after Katrina, I think, maybe back in 2005. And those two boats didn't take down their jibs. You can see them, the clubs in the background. There's the Mutiny. And these guys are sitting over against Dinner Key Pier 7. And the only person who loves this photograph, there are two people. One is Tommy Bremen, and the other is Mark Wood, the two sail makers in Coconut Grove, because they're going to be making business. If you've got a bimini, take it down. Take the frame down if you can. All canvas covers off. Your compass cover, door rail covers, rail covers, those sorts of things. If you have a dinghy, get it off the back. I know a lot of people just leave the dinghy hanging at an angle with the plug off at the back and let the water run out. As you'll see in photographs later, in a decent storm, that will destroy your boat and destroy your dinghy. Securing lines. If you've got lines that are loose, you can tuck them away, tie them up, put a bungee around them. And Jen Cheney gave me the idea of getting some big cable ties from Amazon. They cost next to nothing. And you can cable tie all of your lines down. Door raids and cowl vents off, whatever you like to call them. Put covers in, flat covers. Otherwise, you will get water inside the boat, and it does cause windage. Solar panels, windmills. I know windmills are not always possible. Barbecues, cushions, and all that kind of stuff. You must do it. So I've got a couple of pictures that were taken this afternoon. Where are they? Hold on. So firstly, before I put this person in trouble, here's what I've done with Moonglow. You can see my jib is off. My main is strapped, and I've dropped the boom down so it's not swinging around. You can see my door raids, which are normally at the back, are gone. Everything is tidied up. I've used bungees, you can see, keeping my lines away from the mast so they don't get beaten up. And everything else is tucked away, neat and tidy. If you're a military type person, you'll understand about being squared away. Hi, Obi. Sorry, we saw your message to somebody else. Yeah, so to answer Obi's question, I just saw it come by, is that at this point, it is recommended that your boat should be moved from the strip. What you don't want to do is wake up tomorrow morning and the 5 o'clock tells you there's a hurricane warning, because then you're going to be there and there's going to be chaos. I mean, maybe not at 5, but certainly by 8. All right, so another photo in a different direction over here. There's somebody who's now a potential customer for a sailmaker. I'm sorry if you're online, that person, you might have done your work by now. I'm just making examples of boats that haven't done the right thing and will definitely catch the breeze. Next thing to do, there's that motivating photo. So, and this is talking, moving your boat out of the club. Now, if you're on the rack or the strip, you've got to tow it away. You know, put it on a trailer, put it in the back of Ryan Alexander's house. He's always got space back there. If you have a house, take it there, you know, drop the mast and then put it down with some come-along straps or something like that. I don't know much about that. If somebody is an expert, maybe I see Obi's there, he might be able to talk more about boats on the strip. For boats out on the mooring, which is what affects a bunch of us and makes us all nervous, things to do. To check your cleats and chocks. Get anchors, chain, shackles, rods, kellets. All of those things should be on board. If anybody's at the club now, you can take the launch out and look in my cockpit. And if you're strong enough to steal my big anchor, you deserve it anyway, because you'll have a hernia, because I've got my big anchor lying in the cockpit. Floats and chafe protection. For those of you who don't know about chafe protection, you put that into your fair leads or chocks, and so that the line, as it moves back and forth, doesn't overheat. The most effective material for that is old fire hose. I'll put some up here. You can see some I'm waving around. This is a 2.5-inch fire hose, or if you've got a bigger boat, maybe 3.5-inch fire hose. If you can get hold of some of this, you can buy it online, old fire hose. It's the canvas type, not the new modern one. You turn it inside out and strip the rubber out so it's no longer waterproof, and cut yourself lengths of this. It works very well as a chafe protector because your line running through the middle of it, it gets wet in the rain, and so any heat generated by friction is then dissipated by the rainwater, which is soaking the chafing gear. I do have a couple of spare pieces in my car if anybody's desperate. Otherwise, it's available online, or if you go to the fire station in Rice Street in the back of the Grove, they might have some old hose lying around, although modern materials taking over from the old canvas hose. Floats, I'll talk about floats later. Test your engine, make sure your engine runs, and make sure you have a prop clean that'll drive you, because a prop like that will take you nowhere. There's something Marianne Boyer needs to take care of. All right, so if you're not taking your boat off the strip or rack to a house, where do you move a boat on the mooring field to? Here's some options. A boatyard up the Miami River, something like Hurricane Cove, or what used to be Consolidated is now Apex, although they're not taking too many boats now. You have to take your mast down. Or into it's a condo complex up past Hurricane Cove that takes boats, first come, first served, and you just got to take your checkbook or credit card along because they're expensive. Maybe the marina. I don't know if anybody, after Irma, Dinnicky said they wouldn't be taking people for storms anymore. I don't know if they've recanted on that policy yet. If you've got another place, you can. The Coral Gables Waterway, I'll talk about that. The Mangroves, beautiful traditional hidey hole place. And it's got a little asterisk, as does Marine Stadium, the next line, which I'll talk about as well. If you look at the last line, if you go there, the club will try and provide launch service to those places so that once you've got your boat secured, they'll give you a ride back to the club in the launch. It's not guaranteed, the launch service. It depends on the availability of boats and staff or people to drive the launch. Other places, Star Island behind Miami Yacht Club. Over on the Key, Hurricane Harbor, No Name, Pines Canal. Hurricane and No Name fill up real fast, folks. Behind the spoil islands like Clarington. Oh no, I'll talk about that. It's not a good place, particularly for the storm, folks, and I'll explain why. Don't go to the city moorings or anchor on the outside of the spoil islands. It's a disaster. In Irma, 80% of the boats out there broke free and ended up on very rich people's property somewhat south of the club and had to be lifted off by cranes. It was a disaster, including a very senior member of the club who was very confident that he was going to be okay, and his chafing gear was rubber hose pipe, and it overheated and his lines chafed through, and the boat ended up on a very expensive lawn somewhat south of the club. So let's talk about some of those in a little more detail. Boatyards. So I've mentioned some of them, Hurricane and that. Here's the Hurricane price sheet. Seriously, people, with my boat, I could just buy a new boat. So for Hurricane, it's $30 a foot for 3 days. And I've got a 30-foot boat, say, so that's $900 for 3 days to get into Hurricane. Or they'll haul you out for $45 a foot and put it up on the sticks. M&M, which used to be called, can someone remember, put in the chat, what was M&M used to be called? Don't know. Austral, which is just north of Hurricane, used to be Poland's. Oceanica, which was part of Bertram's, the old Bertram's yard, are places you can go. If you are going to go for a boatyard, I recommend visiting the yard in advance to find out the layout of the yard. Are you going to be near a concrete wall? Do you need extra fenders? Those sorts of things. Find the dockmaster. No, find a bottle of rum, and then find the dockmaster and give the dockmaster the bottle of rum to obtain cooperation. One thing you do need to be a little bit careful is when the winds get up to storm force, the bridges on the river lock down. And I couldn't find any evidence of lockdown at the moment. I was looking on the web just before this, but you have to be aware of it and get up there early. If you do haul out and you have boat US insurance, apparently they pay for half the haul out. Bloody amazing. I wouldn't like to haul my boat out in a storm, having it sitting on sticks out on the land, wiggling around. But I think the guys at Hurricane and the yards do know what they're doing. So if you don't want to pay for a boatyard, maybe you go to some marina that you can find one. And I am not very competent. It just says, make everything strong. Maybe Randy and Carol could chirp in here because they used to be in Dinakey. Using snubbers and chafe gear. And I think this is a good idea. Something like Dinakey where you have fixed walkways is you have to make the lines tight enough that your boat doesn't slam side to side in the pilings, but loose enough that it can ride up and down in the surge. So you've got a kind of you're between a rock and a hard place a little bit. And apparently there's these things, tide minders, which have been successfully that you put round the pilings and they roll up and down the pilings, and you tie your boat to those tide minders. There's 2 brands of them. And then you can keep them real tight so your boat doesn't move side to side. And as the surge comes, your boat rolls up and down the pilings on tide minders. And of course, don't inconvenience other people. Sometimes that doesn't work. So here, this picture on the left-hand side, somebody's dinghy hanging off the back at the wrong angle. This is from Katrina, I believe. Somebody was tied up in this is Dinakey docks over here. The picture at the bottom right is the unfortunate one from Sandy. This is a marina up in New York where they had floating docks. So the docks would float up and down, which is great because you can tie yourself in good and tight and float up and down. But the surge was so great that all the docks floated off the top of the pilings and everything floated away in one complete cluster. So I'm not a great fan of marinas, although for a Cat 1, it's definitely been successful for a long time. But as it gets greater, Irma, which was higher, a lot of boats you've seen, they're still fixing up Dinakey because it was a disaster over there for many people. So the Mangroves, this is kind of one of the club favorites. So here we are up at the club, Dinakey Marina. To get there, if you haven't been there before, is go out, take a wide loop. The area in between here is very shallow, about 2 feet. And there's a marked channel that takes you in towards Cocoa Plum, the pink building south of the club. And when you come in, you look at all the rich people's houses and go, ooh, aren't they rich? Then take the first left, and then you come into this area I've marked with a blue squiggle, which is where there's good hidey hole. Let me zoom in. So as again, you come in, whoops, today's the wrong tool. Come in here, look at the rich people. This is all rich people. Come in here, take the first left, and here you'll find the Cocoa Plum Boat Club. They are unfriendly people. They won't even let you go in there. Don't talk to them. And so you come by, and here's the Coral Gables Waterway Police, and these are good people. They will help you, and they're friendly. They genuinely try to help you. Then where can you hide your boat? There's some space around this area, but you get into private properties somewhere around there, or you come down over here, this L-shaped area. And that can take a lot of boats. It's about 6 feet deep, the water, and that's a great hidey hole. The mangroves are about 20 feet tall. You know, they say if you hide your boat in the mangroves in a hurricane, you sit on the foredeck, you will still get bitten by mosquitoes. Another possibility, there's a little channel up here, which is shallow. It's about 3 feet deep and quite narrow, which is a fantastic hidey hole for a smaller boat as well. And I'll talk about how to tie up in the mangroves. I went there in Irma, and I had an absolutely safe time, no damage in any real sense. So you come into the mangroves, and what you want to do is come in, let's say, and you go here, and you put your nose into the mangroves, nose in, or I was down over at this end, nose in. By the way, you can't, there's a bridge here, so unless you can drop your mast, you have to stop at the bridge. If you can drop your mast, there's plenty of space down over here. I know Pascal goes there. Right, so it's nose into the mangroves, and then tie up like this. You put 2 lines into the mangroves, and I have to tell you, you are not allowed to tie things to a mangrove root. Don't get upset. But apparently you are allowed to throw anchors over mangrove roots and accidentally tangle them and things like that. So you want 2 in. Why 2? In case one breaks. Spring lines to stop your boat from swaying from side to side. And then 2 lines out into the waterway with kellets or heavy chain. The lower picture here shows what you want to do is to have your line going down on a kellet, or I use heavy anchor chain. So it goes like that. There are 2 reasons for having your stern lines down. Firstly, you cannot block the waterway. If you try and put a line straight out like that, the waterway police will come and complain. So you have to not do that, and you get it down. The other benefit is then as the surge comes and your boats lift up, then this straightens, because your boat's gone up higher, something like that by now, and you can cope with the surge. All right, so you allow some slack for the surge. Finally, put some fenders on either side, because it doesn't matter how brilliantly you tie up your boat. If somebody else gets free, they might bump into you. And certainly I've bumped into one of the club ensigns because I didn't have spring lines put out because I was still learning a few years ago. Arrange to get to shore. As I've said, down in the mangroves, the club will try and pick you up. But on the other hand, if you can't, this bridge over here that I'm marking with a red oval, you can climb up, just swim over there with your clothes in a garbage bag, and you can climb up there. It's a very easy sort of, it's just a little, it's got almost like steps. And you come out on Isla Dorada and then call an Uber car or walk out to the big circle, which is down over here at the far end, something like that. So that's the waterway, very successful, and it was a great success in Irma. A lot of us went there, and it was great. One of the problems is it does fill up, so getting there early rather than late is a better idea. I don't know what it's like now. I suspect it's okay still. Maybe tonight I'll go there. Right, Marine Stadium, another tried and true place. For those of you who don't know the way, out into the bay, under Rickenbacker, round the corner past the Rusty Pelican, and into this where rock concerts used to be held, and there used to be water skiing in days of yore. It looks like that. The very safest area of this is down here at this end. The difficulty with being up at the top end is that if the wind's coming like that and somebody breaks loose, by the time they get to you, they're doing 20 knots and they're really going to damage your boat. We know that Dr. McCready had his boat there, what was it called? The light blue ensign, and it broke free from this end and ended up strangely on South Beach. How the hell it got there, it was unknown. It was, somebody found the picture on Facebook, it had been stripped. Another benefit of this is down over here is the rowing club. And so if you're down over here and you want to get to shore, the club launch isn't available, you can swim over here and the rowing club people will let you shower and that kind of stuff. And then you can get a Uber car back on Rickenbacker Causeway. So how do you tie up in Marine Stadium? Well, Marine Stadium is about 10 feet deep. And if you want a 7-to-1 scope on your anchoring, that's 70 feet of road that you need to have out. Well, it's actually a little bit more because you've got to allow for the height of the boat. Let's call it 70 feet. We'll probably do the trick. The holding is very, very good. The mud at the bottom there is very hard. In fact, problems that people have had is getting their anchors out of the mud rather than moving the boat. I know Tom Beavers lost his anchor in Irma there, one of his anchors, because he just couldn't pull it out of the mud. And if somebody will buy me a beer at the bar one day, I'll tell you how to get your anchor out of the mud using a plate of sandwiches and 3 fat friends. So the anchoring is this. It's a triple anchoring at 120 degrees between anchors. All of the roads need to go over the bow roller, everything out the front, because as the storm comes through, your boat is going to go through 360 degrees. So if these lines were tied, like I'm making these little red blocks, that means there's going to be a mess in the front. So everything goes out over the front, over the bow roller. The idea is think where the wind's probably going to be coming from. So let's say you think the wind's going to be coming from here, which is a northeast, which is what we might have now sort of thing. Then drop, you want your first 2 anchors to be at 90 degrees to the expected wind. So you drop one anchor, as we see over here, and then move off. The distance here, if you do a little Pythagoras, is 120 feet. Drop your next anchor, and then go off over this way, so you're 120 feet from each of those. And as you're doing that, make sure you don't run over your lines and that kind of stuff. It's obvious, a little bit. And once you've got them all out, tighten everything up and cleat them onto your bow cleats, and of course run them back to stern cleats as well if you want extra safety. One of the things you do need to do here, if you think Marine Stadium, there's a lot of boats that go there, is you don't want other boats to sit on top of your anchor. So what I have prepared, here's mine. I have 3 of these. It's old dishwasher, and this one's oil bottles that you would tie onto these, each of your anchors, so they're floating at the surface, which marks where your anchors are. It has the benefit of deterring people from anchoring on top of you, and can also help you retrieve your anchors when you go back to get your boat at the end of the day. Right, so that's all written through in detail there in the slides. Last option, not recommended, behind Clarington Island. The tie-up is the same as for the Mangroves, but let's be sure, just so you understand, is that if you tie your stern lines, that's these 2 over here, if you tie onto the mooring field markers or onto the mooring field mooring balls, you will be considered to be in the mooring field, and then the rules about not leaving the mooring field would apply. And the rule about not leaving the mooring field, and I'll leave you to read it, but I'll just replace it again, is if you are not cleared out during a hurricane warning, you're in violation and you lose your mooring for a year. So that's why tonight is a bit of a tense time for a lot of people. We hope at 8 o'clock, 10 minutes, that we'll find out that it's all going to be okay. So you'll see already there's some boats over there. Most of the boats over there now are from the outer moorings. It's the homeless folk who come in and hide behind there, and they've got nothing to lose because they don't have a mooring anyway. Motivating photograph. This one, I believe, is somewhere at the side of Marine Stadium from years ago. I don't know where I got it. So other things to do. Take inventory. Write down what you have on your boat and take photographs. We've all got a phone. Walk around, photograph everything. The reason for that is so you know what's missing, and if you do an insurance claim, you know what's being damaged, and you can say, hey, look, I had this fantastic radio. It's now wet. I now have to fix it. Give me insurance money. Do that. And you should also do the outside of your tie-up as you leave to show that you've done due diligence, again, for an insurance claim. Inventory is useful, and these days it's so easy just to take out your phone and snap, snap, snap as you do your day. This is important, and it's required if you do go into the Coral Gables Waterway, and I recommend it for all cases if you take your boat off the mooring and anchor it somewhere wherever you go. Take a Ziploc bag with a piece of paper in, a couple of them, with the information that I've listed there: boat name, boat year, make, model, Florida number, hull number, where you keep the boat, Coconut Grove Sailing Club, your full name, date of birth, phone numbers, email addresses, where you are. And then duct tape that onto your helm. And I have 2. I do one on my helm and one on my hatch boards. And you might think, why should you put the boat name? Because it might get blown off, and then somebody finds it floating down the Coral Gables Waterway, and then they can say, hey, they phone you and say, hey, we found your Ziploc with your information floating down the waterway, and you think, shucks, I better go and do something. In the waterway, this is required by the Waterway Police, and I recommend this for all people. This information is available in these slides, which will be on the website, or if anybody wants to take a screenshot now, take out your phone and photograph whatever you're looking on. You can get the list of what needs to be done if you're in the waterway. All right, all done. Next. So, preparing in advance. I'm coming down the end straight now. Explore and practice beforehand. If you decide that Marine Stadium's for you, get a barbecue, go out there for a day, practice your anchoring. Randy Cottrell, who's in this chat, came out with me when I first had Moonglow, and we practiced, and they drank all my beer, ate all my sandwiches, but we did learn how to do it. It was a kind of a fun day out. Find ways to get to shore. The launch might not always be available. Be prepared to swim. I take one of those waterproof bags so I can put my phone and everything in. Then you can swim to shore if you need to and dry off. Prepare your information cards. They should be sitting on your boat now. If you want to get towed, it's nice to have insurance, but Boat US. But notice what we discovered in Dorian is that Boat US and Sea Tow and the private operators, about a day before, they won't come and get you anymore. They're too busy doing their work, or they're hiding their boats away themselves. So if you want to get towed away for some reason, because your engine's out of commission or something, you need to get that done well in advance. If you're not going to use the boat, or you're going out of town for work, reduce the windage, or have a friend who's available to do that. Diane does it for me. Check the weather pages, read the club emails. Beware, however, club emails might not always come. You know, the club is busy, Lauren's crazy, her computer might be moving because they move everything from her office to upstairs, and you might not get emails really fast from the club. You can't be 100% reliant on it, and be able to do it without your friends. But I think doing it with your friends is half the fun, and make a plan. So I have a plan. Yeah, I'll show you my plan. Where am I? If you Google for my name, it's weird enough that you'll get me. And it's all my university stuff. But down the bottom are my sailing pages. And in that are my hurricane ops with pictures of my anchors. There you go. That's one of my anchors. And exactly all the equipment that I have, where it can be found on the boat, and what to do in particular times if you're going into the waterway, and if you're going into Marine Stadium, or things like that. So all of that, having that written down is useful, because if you've got friends, actually I should show you that. I mean, even here's my group, the contact team. And so everyone can access this because it's on a website. I print it out and give everybody a copy. I think Bob is around. And let me go back to that. Get that ready. The group is useful. Practice with your team. Buy sandwiches. It's always useful. Yeah, club launches might be suspended sometime tomorrow. Thank you, Carol. I believe if you go down early in the morning, you'll be good. And be able to cope. As I said, prepare, practice. Don't worry. It'll be okay. But make a plan, have friends, and be ready for it rather than waiting. You shouldn't be at West Marine this evening looking for cleats, looking for shackles or something like that, because West Marine are rubbing their hands with glee at the moment. So that's the end. I'm happy to take some questions on the chat. And there's a very nice, motivating photograph. This is Martini after Katrina. And this is Seminole Boat Ramp, I believe. And it got lifted up and dumped down over here. And there was a pile of boats there. And they took it away. And then it survived absolutely okay. They brought a crane and lifted it up, put it in the water. And they were quite happy, except for one crane bill of several $100s. So we don't want to be that. Let's do the right thing. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions for the next 6 minutes, and then we'll see the update on the weather, and we can all do something. Oh, I see the question from Carla Salabaria. Let me show you where to find my plan. If you mean my personal one. So if you just look for my name is weird English. So if you Google for that, there's only 2 in America, and the other one's a biologist. All right, there's only one who lives in Miami. It's me. And down the bottom is my link to my sailing pages, which has details about my boat and things I need to repair. And then there's my hurricane ops page like that. Is that what you needed, Carlos Salabaria? To answer David Rivera's question, does anyone stay on their boat during storms? So you can't stay on your boat in the club if your boat's not supposed to be there. When I was in the Waterway, in Mangroves Waterway for Irma, the guy across from me had a Beneteau 32, and we were just leaving. I was with Eric Moonberg, and I said to the guy, and I swam across, and I gave him my phone number, and I said, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm staying here. And in the middle of the storm, he texted me to tell me that Moonglow had swung and was rubbing on one of the club ensigns. And I asked him, what are you doing? He says, I'm sitting on the foredeck having a cigarette. So yes, it is possible. On the other hand, that picture I showed you of Martini, this picture, well, now I can tell you the sad news. Before, I just moved to the Grove. I didn't have a boat at that stage. And I was looking at the pile of mess, and the police came and chased us away because a couple had tried to stay on their boat on the outer mooring, broken free, and both were deceased in their boat. So I wouldn't call it a safe thing to do, but it's certainly being done. That's David Rivera. I hope that answered your question. Anybody else got any other questions? We're down to 4 minutes. All right, I'm going to turn off the recording.